Damn colonials with your peasant rifles. A real man shoots wood and iron.
What?
A real man shoots wood and iron. Show you how a proper gentleman fights. Avast! Huzzah!
Alright guys, welcome back. It's Austin again from Mid-Tier Thoughts. So, today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite guns in my collection. That is my Lee Enfield, my #4 Mark II. So, the Lee Enfield was a British service rifle in some variation, whether it be the #1 through the #4 series, from the late 18 to early 1900s, all the way until about the 1950s, until it was replaced by the FAL. So this thing has been used all over the world by all of the Commonwealth countries, India, Canada, obviously Great Britain. The Irish used this in some form or another for a little bit, as well as the New Zealanders, and basically anywhere that was at some point in time owned by the British. So we're going to kind of talk about this a little bit, kind of dive into some of the cool things about it, and then we're going to shoot it and show you why I love this thing so much. Now, I am a history buff, but I am by no means an expert. So some of the stuff that we're going to go on here, this is not going to be a forgotten weapons, gun Jesus deep dive into that. So if that's something you're looking for, that's probably the channel you want to go to. This is going to be a fun layman's overview of the rifle. So, the cool thing I like about this is, for me, when it comes to Milsurps, the really cool thing is seeing the mentality of countries at the time going into the firearms design, as well as the idea that these are the guns that made or broke empires. These are the guns that won great victories or lost people entire colonies or subcontinents. So this rifle here, this one was produced in the early 50s. So a little too late to see World War II. However, this rifle would have been towards the end of World War II whenever it was being produced into the early Cold War age. So this is a 10-round magazine. Now, while the magazine is technically detachable, detachable magazines are not really issued. Generally, the way that you fed the rifle was through these little, they call them chargers, basically stripper clips. The idea was you would set 5 rounds in a charger, you would load it into the gun, and you would load 2 of these, making it 10 rounds. So the unique thing about this is most of the bolt-action rifles at the time, the Mosin Nagant, the K98, variants thereof of the Mausers, even the Springfield L3, were limited to about 5 rounds of ammunition. So this having 10 rounds gave you a huge advantage because you had twice as much ammunition before having to reload as the other guy. The other thing that was really cool about this is the bolt. So the bolt here, basically kind of spring-loaded. You pop this up, pull back, and when loaded, like as it is here, you can pop it up, just pops right back out there. Super quick. One of the fastest bolts, in my opinion, I think, between a lot of the Milsurp rifles that are out there. So generally, with this, you have your safety located on the side. So in this position, you're ready to fire. In this position, you are unsafe, and the weapon will not fire. Can't work the bolt, nothing. So I think that seeing the different ways of mentality and thought going into this as far as like how to build a service rifle, I think is really cool, because it's very intuitive safety on here, where if you're holding the rifle, all you have to do is push forward and you're ready to go. If you want to set it on safe, you literally have to take your hand off the fire control, set it on safe. So I think that it's a very conscious design that they do in here that I think is really interesting. Now the other thing I think is really cool when it comes to older rifles like this is some of the more subtle designs. So you can see here this kind of cutout right here. The idea for this is as you open it and you go to load it and you push down, you have a spot for your thumb to go as you load in your rounds. So you can kind of just push it down real quick, it catches your thumb, you do the next one, push it in there. So subtle design features like that I think are really interesting. Also, the guide that you have to feed your chargers. Another interesting little note that on here is that if we look at our iron sights, we have a peep sight on the back. That this here is very, like when you think about like your AR, for example, the modern rifles, is your peep sights 0 to 200 yards. Very similar way of thinking for this rifle. Now, if you want to shoot out further than that, you want to have a little bit more accuracy, they have flip-up peep sights as well. So these flip-up peep sights that are kind of laddered out are really interesting, and that These generally typically go from about 300 to, this one goes to 1,300 yards. So for me, the optimism, I think, is really interesting to see a rifle like this that has the sights set out to about 1,300 yards. Which realistically, if you're going to shoot this at 1,300 yards and have any type of sight picture, you're basically mortaring the rifle like this, and what they used to call volley fire, which is kind of an interesting thing to see with these rifles, the transition from old ways of thinking into modern technology, where an old way of thinking back in the days of very early bolt-action rifles or in very early musketry was the idea of volley fire, which is throwing enough lead in the air at a set distance that you're bound to hit something. So we're talking back about the days of line infantry, where you would have shoulder-to-shoulder guys, and the idea was overwhelm them with enough lead in the air that you'll hit the enemy. The idea of volley fire with this at that 1,300-yard distance is basically just throw it over there like artillery. It will rain enough stuff down on them at some distance as they close the gap that will hit something. So not really like a one-man accuracy, but rather you get a group of guys to do this. The Japanese had another idea for volley sights that it's really interesting in their Arisakas, where they had fold-down aircraft sights. But the idea for them was to use the rifles in large numbers to try to shoot down aircraft, which would work on canvas and wood biplanes and flying at slow distance, at slow speeds and low distances off the ground. When we start getting into like things like the American Hellcats and a few other aircraft the Americans threw out. But as we go back through this again, the detachable magazine, again, the idea, while kind of a modern concept like that, these were really issued because they took more to make, and wartime Britain was really scared for resources. So these chargers could be disposed of, thrown away, made for pennies a piece, whereas magazines were integral to the weapon and you didn't want people losing them. So I've read stories, however, of British veterans who would basically, as time went on, would acquire more magazines like this and have them locked and loaded, ready to go, to where they might have a few of those in addition to the chargers, to where if they needed a quick reload or they didn't, for some reason, didn't want to do the chargers, they just had these popped, ready to go, ready to roll. Now, the British were highly trained with these rifles, and of course there's old adages out there, what I'm not sure the validity of, but basically the idea was, if you came across a British infantry team, you knew it was the British because you had high rates of fire that were incredibly accurate. Alright guys, so we're loaded up with 10 rounds. I'm just going to do a quick example of how quickly you can fire 10 rounds off. Hopefully our target stays up. So this thing doesn't like getting smacked with that 303 at the top. So we're going to give it a shot, see how quick we can do this. Alright. Man, if you can go.
My tea and crumpets.
Dang it. Target, we're just mag dumping in the trash. Alright, time. Well, unfortunately the target didn't stay up like we hoped, so we just mag dumped into trash. 303 ain't cheap, unfortunately, so that is going to be about where we're going to call it. On the bright side, though, I do have a reloading kit for this, which is kind of my first entry into reloading, so we'll do some more footage on that in a bit.